Online travel agents are eating into people's profit. So you need to know how to use those booking channels. You need to know how to do dynamic pricing.
For your business, you want to be planning ahead, making sure that
there's no school to go to run a hotel. Australian accommodation industry is so interesting because it's actually underpinned by small owner-operator businesses. How they got into it, so much of it's common sense, working hard, liking people.
There's a first home buyers grant. We see that affecting letting pools where people will come in, get the gut grant from the government, get as much value out of that as possible, and then they're out of there in a year, which gives a real opportunity for your letting pool. We talk about the challenges developing into opportunities, but you have to. Welcome to Checked In with Resort Brokers. I'm Frank.
And I'm Trudy. Join us as we explore the intricate world of the wider Australian accommodation industry.
We're going to walk you through the ever-evolving landscape of hotels, motels, caravan parks, management rights and the communities, but most importantly, the stories that underpin them all.
From market trends and expert predictions to the incredible personal stories and lessons learned, we're going to cover it all.
Join us as we navigate this amazing industry together. Welcome to our very first, our numero uno, our inaugural episode of Checked In with Resort Brokers. I'm here with Trudy Crooks, Managing Director of Resort Brokers, Managing Director Extraordinaire. My name is Frank Matus. Trudy, how excited are you for the journey we're about to embark on?
I'm pretty excited, Frank. I mean, it seemed like an even better idea at 1 o'clock in the morning.
I think it was 2 o'clock, but
when
yes.
we first started talking about it. But no, I'm excited. And when we started thinking about what we're looking to get out of it and who we're going to have, and within 5 minutes, we put a list together of all the interesting people that we know that we think that potential people who are going to listen to this would like to hear from. I mean, it just reconfirmed for us, right? We have such an amazing industry that we're in.
We've got a broad range. We're talking to a broad range of people, or we're hoping to, right? And so with 40 years at Resort Brokers, or we're coming into our 40th year, well, who do you want to talk to on this? We've got some ideas, but who would you really like to see?
I think last thing we want it to be is actually just talking about us and how we do deals and what we're seeing in the market, right? Really, I think where you and I got excited by doing this and taking it on was actually all the interesting people that we meet and their stories, how they've become successful, how they've created their wealth, and we. Because all we do is accommodation, but we cover so much of the market. We cover all the regions. So we know so many people who own motels and caravan parks and who live in their business. Developers, because we are the biggest sellers of off-the-plan management rights. I think we have such a nice range of people. It keeps our day interesting, and hopefully it'll keep this interesting.
I think so. And so you touched on it right there. It's those stories from the communities that we operate in. And so we want to sort of humanise the business side of what we're doing to the businesses that we are affecting, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and we want to bring in a really big cross-section, right? I mean, our business has seen such a transition in the last 10 years where we've gone from a total change in the brokers because a lot of our four-founding agents have since retired, and so we've seen that transition, but we've been able to really enjoy the experience that they bring. So if we can get some of those legends back in the room, that's going to be amazing. And then also some of the great new technologies we're seeing, some of the challenges we're seeing, some of the developments, what they look for. I think we can get a great mix of people here, and I think there'll be something for everybody. And we'll have some fun on the way, Frank.
I think we're going to try and have some fun to make sure that you and I are not the only people that are listening and watching this. We're going to watch it anyway, let's be honest.
Hey, Frank, how long have you been with us at Resort Brokers?
I've been here a grand total of 2.5 years. And during that time, which doesn't feel like a long time, but it also feels like an extended stretch. But we have seen some changes in that time as well. Like I'm a broker here in Brisbane, so I'm on the ground talking to people day to day. And part of the inception of what we're talking about here in this podcast is trying to understand what some of those changes are along the way in management rights, but in hotels, motels and caravan parks as well. Yeah. But just to be able to tell some of these stories so people can sort of just break down some of the barriers that exist between the business and the communities that we're in.
And realise how awesome the people in the industry are, right?
That's what makes this industry, we talk about it before where, relationships are a big part of it, but sometimes, the people that you can help along with their small businesses or larger businesses as we have as well is kind of the secret sauce for me. That's why I've been successful in my 2.5 years. We've gotten rid of some, helped some people sell some really big assets, but also just some mums and dads that are in transitional periods. That's kind of where management rights started, right? When your dad got involved in this business almost 40 years ago, was about how we could, through the eyes of a 2-person management team. That was how management rights started, really.
The Australian accommodation industry is so interesting because it's actually underpinned by small owner-operator businesses, right?
Absolutely.
It's very unique. That's very different to Asia and Europe and America, although America's probably a little bit more...
with the superintendent model, right? It has a thing.
But motels over there, highway motels and so on, very similar to Australia because it's a big country. But there are other operating models, but really it's people in their business running them day to day and, where they came from, how they got into it. I mean, I love hearing all that and also how transferable so many of their skills are.
Absolutely.
Really, there's no school to go to run a hotel or run a management rights.
Well, there is, but not for the way that you need to be as an effective owner, right?
Well,
it's a different thing.
So much of it's common sense, working hard, liking people.
Yes, you have to like people.
You do. Everyone thinks they like people. That's right. But if you're not sure, go buy yourself a motel or a management rights.
Exactly.
If you're on the fence.
Well, that's kind of the thing here as well. Like, that those are the tenets of what makes it interesting to get into. But other than that, there's, aside from having a little bit of money there's little barrier to entry here. And so it's an industry, and I'm talking about from management rights all the way to caravan parks, that it's a low barrier to entry. You can come into this, but you have to have the right mentality to get into it. You need to have a little commercial nous, but you've got to want to be involved. It's not a passive investment.
No, and you know what? They are 24/7 businesses. They are a live organism. You can never leave them. I think one of the biggest things is that people, struggle to get away from them. That's why we see them turn over every 4 or 5 years because of the burnout. But compared to other industries, it's got amazing retention.
Yeah.
And that's for so many reasons, right? They're great if you have a young family because you can be at home with the children because your office is on site, which is amazing. You can live out of them. So not only do you get really good returns, but you can also live for free. Not many businesses are like that. You might run your life through your business, but you can't actually live on site. So that's a huge thing. And with the housing crisis, I think that's what's driving the new range of buyers that we're seeing come in the smaller properties, leaseholds, smaller management rights across the country. The fact that you can buy a home and a business, that you can be your own boss, that you don't need a really certain set of skills. A lot of it is common sense. And that's not saying it's not hard work and there's not challenges. And then also, obviously, the returns are amazing, right? I mean, compared to most other asset classes, whether it be an investment or whether it be an operating business, the returns are great and the banks love them. And the banks love them because they're a good model, right? And there's not a whole lot of new hotels, unfortunately, being built. So the existing operators, whether it be a Mantra or an Oaks, which is a management rights, or, a Best Western in the middle of Roma, either way, the returns are really good and the banks are really supportive.
And so as we see the economy changing, the market changes a little bit, you mentioned, interestingly, that it's a business that you're involved in all the time and it's difficult to leave. That's changing as well, we see as well. So there's a commercialisation, I suppose, that happens along the way where this industry is maturing to a point where you do have more commercial operators coming involved into this, so people can look at it from a bit more of a corporate level, but then you still have just your owner operators as well. So it really sits on both sides. It sits on all sides of that sort of gambit.
Look, I think the commercial money's coming in because of the returns.
Because of the returns,
right? If you look at other asset classes like childcares or petrol stations or so on, those yields have compressed so much. It's still seen as a little bit of a left of centre asset class, but I think people are starting to understand it more. And I don't think it's seen as risky or as volatile as it used to be. And the returns are still really fantastic. So that's why that's coming. I don't know if you can still beat from an operator guest experience, a hands-on owner-operator.
That's right. I am your owner-operator here. I'll shake your hand and then,
Yes.
yeah.
And that personal touch, and don't get me wrong, technology, and I'm sure we'll do a lot of podcasts around technology.
I think so. Yeah, it's an important part.
There's been so much change and there will continue to be so much change, and that can be great. But like what we do as brokers, for someone who runs one of these businesses, when I spend 4 or 5 nights every fortnight in a hotel or a motel across the country with our fabulous clients or to-be clients. Yeah. And, when you've been travelling and you're out of the airport and you've had a long day and then you check into your property at the end of the day, someone's saying, "Hi, Trudy, how are you? So nice to see. Where have you been?" And I know that is invaluable when you travel a lot. And because of the geographical challenge of Australia, that I think makes a big difference. And I think that's the art that you don't want to see be lost with technology.
Or corporatizing the world as well, because you still want to have that personalised approach. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question where, this industry, whilst it is, we talk about it being, it's not easy, but it's simple or something in that space. Yeah. So if people are like, "Oh, geez, this is interesting. This is an interesting game to be involved." I guess that's kind of where we were coming from with this medium as well, is to help break down some of the barriers and to get more people excited about this industry, because part of this, people don't know that it really exists as a job option, as a investment option, as a life change, sea change option as well.
Wow, it's interesting though. Anyone who's been in it, or most people who have come into it, if it's been right for them, have stayed in it, bought one, most that they can afford or whatever they feel comfortable with. It's gone well, then they've sold because, they're just ready to move on. But then they've come back in, bought a bigger one, and you see that. Like people who are in the industry, it's a well-kept secret. I mean, management rights, how many units... I know you know how many management rights. Do you know roughly how many units are run under management rights structures?
You are going to really be testing me on camera.
Thousands and thousands of them. Yeah,
right? Thousands. So we know that the industry is about 8 billion. And that we've done that through in turnover, and that's a statistic that we've had to go on the ground and get the research in. So for us, we've been in this industry for 40 years, and we don't know the size of it entirely. So we're really conducting the research to understand what that universe is, and we continue to get surprised
at how big it is.
At how big it is. It's the $8 billion industry that nobody knows about. There's 3,500 schemes in southeast Queensland alone. And that's the ones that we know about.
But also the schemes, right? And hopefully eventually we'll get to actually have every stakeholder within these businesses come and talk about it, right? But most in Brisbane and the Gold Coast, if you've stayed at a Mantra, you've stayed at an Oaks or one of those big high-rises for your Christmas holidays, more than likely that's run by a management rights operator.
I used to think, before I even knew about this industry, I used to wonder why in Brisbane and southeast Queensland on the Gold Coast, there was not so many hotel brands. It was because this serviced apartment model, which I didn't know about management rights at the time, that's the bedrock of how the big part of the tourism industry in Queensland underpins
it. And that's why it was so successful with Mantra that sold to Accommodation, which is the biggest hotel company in the world. I mean, the fact that the biggest hotel company in the world, a publicly listed company in Paris, is the biggest owner of the management rights in the world is pretty incredible, but it's a testament.
It's a testament.
It's a really, given the fact you don't own the real estate, it means that you've got a really asset light, income positive, great cash flow business.
Yes.
Which they realise. And we're starting to see that more and more. And you're starting to see a bit of franchising of unbranded management rights, because don't get me wrong, the corporatisation or the big hotel groups coming in is good for the industry because there are new challenges. Online travel agents are eating into people's profits.
Yeah.
You need to be able to get your guests through who go into Google. So you need to know how to use those booking channels. You need to know how to do dynamic pricing. So they have got real value. They've got buying power.
Yes.
With insurance and all those cost price things, they really do. We've been lucky enough to be the Quest preferred agent for over a decade. And through COVID, obviously, Quest is a franchise model where big leaseholds sit behind them.
Yep.
And, the leasing code of conduct came in. There was a lot of people who still had to pay their mortgages to the banks, and there were a lot of tenants who no one could come and stay. And I think the support that Quest gave their franchisees and their landlords has meant that they have come out stronger. They
absolutely.
were there, they trained them, they made their landlords and tenants sit round a table, and their relationships out of that are better. And as a network, that's never been stronger. So
that's developing that community, right?
Like which
it doesn't really matter whether it's just a small management rights down the road where you are living right beside your manager, or the corporate structure as well. It still comes down to those relationships.
Well, everything's down to relationships. It's a bit like what we do.
Yes.
I mean, it would have been in what you did before you were with us. I mean, tell the audience what you did before you came with us.
Oh, God. Small business consulting has kind of been the backbone of where I developed some commercial skills, I suppose. And that was on the back of I was helping companies get the benefit out of face-to-face engagements through large-scale trade shows and exhibitions all over the world.
Yep.
I used to run these shows, but then I started my own business helping companies maximise what they were doing out of it.
Yep.
And so completely different industries. I don't class myself as a real estate agent, but I've got a real estate license. I'm a small business consultant here, and that's what floats my boat. And that's where the overlap in what we do is, because it's all just about relationships, and it's all about trying to find a way to make those relationships symbiotic. So because you've got so many different stakeholders in this. As a broker in Brisbane or any of our brokers around the country, we talk finance, we talk legal, we talk accounting, we're bailiffs sometimes, we wear many hats. And that's where it's important for us to have great relationships with our clients, because they need to trust us to be able to have those conversations.
But also, I think the best piece of advice you could give to someone is make sure you use the right people.
What
we do is so niche.
Yes.
It is actually about using the right people.
There is a community within the community here. You need to be talking, and hopefully we're going to have some of these people come on board, and we're going to talk about the benefit of utilising each other in a professional sense.
Well, I always like the analogy, you wouldn't take your Ferrari to get service at a Honda, right? I don't know.
I don't know. Do you own a Honda? I don't own a Honda.
I don't own a Ferrari either.
I like to say you don't own the Ferrari either. I like to say you wouldn't get heart surgery from your GP, right? Which is the same metaphor.
But it is, right? You want to go to the people who are experts, particularly in something niche. And that would always be the biggest piece of advice we would give to people. And doesn't mean that your lawyer or the accountant you use now is not fantastic for all your other stuff, but because it's so specialised. And management rights has got a layer of legislation, which is great. It underpins the value of it. It gives it security, and because it's such a big industry, it needs it.
Yes.
And Queensland's the only state that's got really positive legislation. But, the legislation's this high.
Exactly.
I went to school to eat my lunch, so I'm not the person to break down the legislation for you.
Well, that's right. We've got people that can do that. But at the same time, as this industry is shifting and changing, you want to be talking constantly with the team that you've put together and moving with the times as well. Like, we'll be talking on this podcast, we'll be talking to operators, we'll be talking to body corporate managers who administer the business of the body corporate. Hopefully we'll have some people who are living in these schemes coming on board as well. And from all these different perspectives, it's still just the one industry, and we have to work together, because some of the things that were true yesterday aren't true tomorrow, whether that's from a legal perspective. Exactly. It's a changing world and a changing market that directly influences us. So that's how this was born, really, is so we can highlight some of the stories that we've got ourselves, but within the industry, to try and help navigate this space, because it can be a little bit complicated and daunting, especially for new people, and that's what we really want to do.
It's not. No,
I know it's not.
No, it's not.
It's very easy.
Give us a call.
Sign
Make
right
it easy.
here.
You'll never make more money. You'll love it. Hey, do you reckon that owning your own business before you came and worked with us, and we always say that all brokers have businesses within our business. We're really uncorporate. We're very female led. We really all about the culture. Do you think that running your own business helps you now talk to people about their own bit? Because it's nerve-wracking, right? Like whether you're buying or selling, this is people's biggest investment. It's their home, it's their livelihood. You know, it's an anxiety. I don't know if you've bought or sold a house. That can stress you out beyond.
Yeah.
And this is obviously everything tied into one. And then you've got emotions, and then you've got to get them through banks and valuers. Then you've got the market. Do you think how much do you think that's helped you?
I think it might be the key thing. It's a really good question. And I tell you what it boils down to for me. It's understanding how difficult it is to make $1, right? That when you move away from being a salaried employee to being, running off your own bat, making that first dollar is quite a exercise and an excursion. Yeah. And so by understanding that for yourself, I think you're able to get to a trust level with the people that you're talking to, whether it's buying or selling, because it's the same game from a different perspective. That understanding of how difficult this is, it helps you get to a point of trust relatively quickly, and it gives you some experience along the way that you can share.
But I think too, trust is so relevant, and you've touched on as usual, spot on. but that you only buy from people you like, and you only buy from people you trust, right? And it's such a big purchase. You can't over communicate. But I think from our side, I mean, we turn down 1 in 3 listings because we just can't achieve our client or our potential client what they want.
Yeah, it's a good point.
We're not listing agents. We're not in the business of advertising how many properties we've got on the market. We're results based, and we want to be honest. Because the worst thing you can do is have your property on with 5 different agents. Yeah. Choose one. Whatever you do, please choose one agent. Hopefully it's us.
Yes.
But Well,
that's also important to note, especially as things change. And one thing that I've noticed in my own 2.5 years in this industry is it changes really quickly, right? Things that were really important yesterday are not the things that are super important today. And we could spend hours talking about what those are. But that trust element's important, because us giving you the wrong information up front as brokers on the ground is just going to hurt us down the track, because it's going to be so much. It's futile. I'd rather have an honest conversation with a buyer or seller rather than waste everybody's time, because you've got money at play. More importantly, time. Yeah. I'm selfish with my own time because I want to be able to provide value to these people as best as possible, right? And so, like you say, we turn down more listings than
almost the same at the moment,
the same as what we're doing, but that's to the benefit of trying to make sure that we're providing results for our clients.
Just a little snippet on the Brisbane market, right? So obviously there's a whole lot of factors going on. There's a housing crisis.
Yep.
So for management rights owners, you would say that there's probably one of the biggest challenges now is letting pools getting smaller, because people who bought the units as investments in the 2010-11 unit boom, right, have had great returns, but now their interest rates are going up. Even if their rent's going up, do they want the hassle of an investment, or are they just going to cash out since prices are so high?
Yep.
What are you hearing about that? Is that something your buyers are talking to you too?
Absolutely. It is front and centre, and we're going to have some people on board that are going to be talking about this very topic, specifically about letting pools. But it's a perfect storm of things happening in management rights in the southeast Queensland market. Brisbane kind of missed a couple of the meteoric rises that Sydney and Melbourne had over the last 10 or 15 years.
Yes.
You take that into account with money being cheap for 15 years, then you conversely have, 13 interest rate rises in a row, and of course it's going to have an impact on the market. You've also got baby boomers retiring. You've got people moving up from southern states. So all of these things are happening at once without a whole lot of development going on in Brisbane at the same time. So we're going to be talking to developers about how they're going to be addressing that. But the fact is, this perfect storm has a real impact on people. So when you're talking about, this is what we're talking about, small business consultancy, right? Because how do you maximise the income that you're getting? How do you maximize the saleability for your business? Because, on average, you were saying before, maybe 5 years is what people are transacting in and out. So you want to be thinking about that up front. So all of these things that are coming in and colliding at once, various elements of those are going to affect you at different times. You want to be planning ahead, getting your team together, making sure that your income and your revenue streams are there and in place as best as possible for that, and then thinking about ways that you can take take the benefits out of it without taking the hits as hard. And every business is a little bit unique in that front. So you have to get into the nitty and gritty.
Then buyers are spending a lot more time looking at the letting pool,
Absolutely.
the breakdown, how long the people have lived there, how long have you had an investment in there.
Absolutely. It's looked at a lot more closely now. And we look at it as an ever-changing industry as well. So we need to make sure that we're communicating what that market sentiment is back to our vendors.
Well, exactly.
Right? Because if this thing's happening, we're seeing a trend, we're at the coalface of it. We need to be communicating that not only to the people that we're working with, but to the industry, which is kind of why we're here.
Do you know what though? You never want to sell someone into something you can't sell them out of.
Yes.
Right? So that's one of the main fundamental pillars of our philosophy. But then the other one is, and I can still hear my father saying it, that money is made in the buying, not the selling, right? And if you think of some of the legends we're going to have on here.
Yes.
And some of the wise things they've said to us about cycles always coming back around and everything that goes up must come down. Well, then you know that if you can buy a business where there might be few challenges or perceived challenges, right, and buy it at the right price in that market, and that's all you should ever do, right? People aren't ever going to pay for blue sky. They're paying for what's there.
What's there on the ground at the time.
But there will be another development cycle. Investors will always go to the new shiny thing. There'll be a lot of people who have downsized into units that are too small for their lifestyles. And when they can buy a bigger unit, they will.
Yes.
Right? And so that will happen. So that would, there's a really strong argument that there's a lot of reasons why now's a good time.
Absolutely. And so, we talk about the perfect storm that exists on both sides of the fence here, right? Some of the stuff we're talking about, there's a first home buyers grant. We see that affecting letting pools where people will come in, buy get the grant from the government, get as much value out of that as possible, and then they're out of there in a year, when it gives a real opportunity for your letting pool. We're going to be talking about that in depth as to how to develop those relationships with your complex, with your ownership group, to take advantage of those positive cycles that are going to be beneficial to your business in time as well. So like you say, absolutely, there's always opportunity there. We talk about the challenges developing into opportunities, but you have to do some things along the way to get yourself prepared for that.
I think also, if you're really serious about buying a business, you have to realise that you're never going to get everything.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you want in a house? I'd like tennis court and a swimming pool. Well, no, what's the most important things for you? Otherwise, you can just find yourself looking.
Yeah.
You've got to take the jump eventually.
Yes.
Look, the most experienced buyers that we deal with are always willing to take on the most risk, right? Because they just have the comfort. They've been there before, they back their ability to do it, and they know it's going to come back around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And we see that at the moment. And, as the market shifts, people have some more choice. There is, different asset classes and structures coming on, more so than when people were sort of holding on to their businesses over a couple of years ago. So people have got that. But then it's our job to help them educate that.
But you never have a market with the perfect amount of buyers and the perfect amount of sales. Because if you did, we wouldn't have a job.
Well, we see it in the rear view. That's always what we see in the past, right?
It's in the rear view.
Exactly.
I remember when I started many moons ago and sold my first motel in Coffs Harbour when I was 21. And
that was your first one,
that was
Coffs.
my first motel. I can still remember.
Can we say with the name of that?
It was the Zebra Motor Inn.
Zebra, there we go.
Still a fantastic spot. I remember going down with the lessees who ended up buying it. And I was so young, they drove me down. I did have my licence, but I think it was wise for me not to drive people to Coffs Harbour. And we ate the biggest box of lollies the entire way down. And I think I could go 1 for 1 with the lady that bought it, and that did the deal. But and then I think of places that when I came back from London and I was given a patch and I had to go and earn my stripes.
That's where you earned your stripes, was in London,
I went
right?
to Rocky, out to Emerald was my patch then. And I remember talking about cycles. When we did a big deal on a motel there, a big lease deal, and that was at the time that Emerald was mining boom. So you look at P&L's 110% occupancy and you think, how's that right? And the mining companies will say, we'll rent the whole place at full freight, 100%, but if no one's here by 5, you can rent it to someone else.
So that's how you get to 110%.
110%.
Yeah, wow.
Well, to show you how fast things move, so we went unconditional. And in the time between unconditional and the landlord had 14 days under the lease to take their option. It was under rented based on these new inflated numbers. The landlord took it back, right? And then we were going to sell off a new lease the day before. He took it back, unbeknownst to us.
Yeah.
And then, boom, it turned off the lights, and he held that property and ended up having to move in and run it for 8 years before he could re-justify getting his money back out because the trade just went down. So things moved. Can I tell you now, we're in a cycle not driven by mining. We could sell 10 of them.
Yeah.
So things do come around as sure as day, and so will new development.
Absolutely. And so we're in this state of change. We all feel it a little bit now. We're really excited about giving people an opportunity to tell their stories with us being in the industry. We've got 40 years coming up with Resort Brokers. In your mind, we've got some developers coming on. We've got some operators of management rights businesses. We've got hotel groups. Who else have we got that you think that is going to be interested in having a yarn to us on camera?
I reckon some of the developers are amazing. I find, because I love it, I met an amazing woman last week at a hotel conference. She does all the fit outs for all the 5-star hotels.
Oh, wow.
Across
Awesome.
Asia. And she was talking to me about what the trends are. That stuff's fascinating. I'd love us to have some end users.
Absolutely.
What's it like for the tenant if you've got a good manager or bad? What do you care about? Different investors. I think if we showed people 5% of the people that we spend our day with, they'd understand why we're so chipper. Well, we love what we do.
I love the people that we're working with as well. Like this business is, we talk about relationships, but it really underpins, how this accommodation business moves and grows and commercializes, professionalizes, but still has people to its core, right? And so that's what we're trying to get out of Checked In with Resort Brokers. I'm excited to be doing this with you, Trudy.
Frank.
I think this is really cool as to how we give people a bit of a platform to talk about this wonderful industry we're in. So, ladies and gentlemen, please talk to us. Give us some comments. Tell us who you'd like to talk to. Tell us who you'd like to see on this. Tell us some of the challenges that you're feeling, right? And we'd love to get into it with you because we see this as a platform to help bridge the gap between the businesses and the communities, and we'd love for you to get involved. So thank you very much, Trudy Crooks, Managing Director of Resort Brokers. Thank you very much for joining us here on Checked In with Resort Brokers.
Thanks. Thank you so much for joining us on Checked In with Resort Brokers. If you enjoyed the insights from this episode, we'd love your support with a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
And don't forget to hit subscribe on your favourite platform and stay connected with us on social media at Resort Brokers.
We're excited to continue this amazing journey with you. See you on the next episode.